hilariously or potentially tragically. Take note of, exactly. Exactly. So the play is a great deal of hoo-ha about not a great deal of anything, but also a great deal of hoo-ha about overhearing and thinking you understand what you've heard, but in fact you haven't. So, Mike is, oh, appropriate. Mike has the mic. And if you are of a gentle frame of voice, I'm going to ask Mike simply to bring the handheld microphone over to you so that everyone can hear your question. And we'll wait while those arriving get settled. Wonderful. How many of you are familiar with the Folger Shakespeare series? They're published by the Folger Library in DC. I'm going to pass this around just so you can get a look. If you're looking for, you don't want to get piled into bed with your giant variorum, all the plays of Shakespeare. You can do yourself serious bodily damage if you fall asleep and roll over on it. The Folgers are wonderful. They're not overly scholarly and extremely accessible. So accessible in the sense of easy to make out what's on the page. One page is text, the other page is notes and explanation. Just have a look at a couple of pages and pass it around. Good morning to everybody as we arrive. I think at this point I should get rolling as it's a little after 9. Thank you all for being here in spite of the fog. I hope the fog outside is worse than the fog in my head. So we'll see. We can split up, as I understand it, Shakespeare's career into the so-called early mid-career plays. He's young, he's ambitious, he's writing plays for an up-and-coming company in London, and they're a mishmash of histories and cloak and dagger gore. Frankly, his first so-called tragedy, Titus Andronicus, is really a horrible play. I can't think of much to recommend it. The most interesting character is the most evil. But it's not a tragedy. Even Romeo and Juliet, I'm going to shock you, isn't a tragedy. It's pathetic. It's not tragic. In the sense that it's really a play about two cute young people who meet the wrong person at the wrong dance, coming from the wrong families. It's a play about the terrible things that happen owing to mistiming. People don't get messages at the right time. Girls are fall in love with somebody just before their parents want them to marry somebody else. But none of the tragedy arises from any real exploration of character. Still, it's a play we all love to love and go home feeling weepy about because they're both so impossibly cute. But a tragedy, in my book, it isn't. For tragedy, you have to look at the middle period when Shakespeare seems to have gone through some kind of very dark place himself. And that's the second paragraph. The old queen dies in 1603, and suddenly England is plunged into a great deal of a sense of change. The new king, James I of England and the 6th of Scotland, is not at all like the old queen. It's a regime change, and we know all about regime changes and how uncomfortable they can make all of us, one way or another, whether we're for or against. And Shakespeare's plays begin to delve into real darkness in the human heart. The great tragedies are Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, and Lear. And they are tragic in the sense that the tragedy springs from conflicts within. Yes, there are bad things happening on the outside, but those happen in comedies too. You couldn't have a comedy without some sort of conflict, as we'll see when we talk about Much Ado About Nothing. But in tragedy, the conflict on the outside is only a mirror of the terrible conflicts within. I was at Stratford, Ontario a few years ago with Sally Foley and Ingrid Farquharson. Many of you know these ladies. And we saw Lear. I had taught Lear. I had seen Lear with Laurence Olivier in a film version, but I'd never seen a live production of Lear. And by the end of Act 1, Scene 1, I was already in tears. I know almost line by line what's going to happen. But seeing Shakespeare played well, it's not a question of waiting for what you don't know is going to happen. You do know what's going to happen. And it's the terrible inevitability of it. By the end of the play, I was limp, and I observed to Ingrid, as we got up to shuffle out of our aisle, that I felt as though I'd been through all of Holy Week, compressed into 3 hours. If you've ever done all of Holy Week, you know what that feels like. Except that in Lear, there is no obvious resurrection. Cordelia is dead. My poor fool is hanged. If there is a change in Lear, it is in the mad, bad old man himself. Some would argue that he's completely unchanged, that the play says that life sucks and now we really know it. Others read Lear to say this is about the possibility of regeneration only through the power of love and forgiveness. Which leads me to Shakespeare's deep, deep interest in those two ideas. There are other ideas that I've alluded to on page 1, but by the last 4 plays, known as romances, one of which, Pericles, is a real dog of a play. Cymbeline is interesting but horribly confusing, and The Winter's Tale, exquisite, and The Tempest, beyond exquisite. They're the last 4 plays he wrote, as far as we know. And interestingly, perhaps the only original idea I've ever had about Shakespeare or anything else is this. All 4 of those last plays share the following characteristics, and they are paragraph 6. First, they all involve journeys to, if not wild and exotic and unknown lands, certainly faraway lands. It's stretching it a bit to say that The Winter's Tale is exotic, but then Sicily, as Shakespeare knew it, and Bohemia are, in terms of 1600s sailing, a long way away. In The Tempest, we're on an island on the other side of the world. The Winter's Tale, I covered that. Cymbeline has scenes in ancient Rome, in ancient Britain, and the far reaches of Wales. And Pericles is a travelogue of the entire Mediterranean world. So already we're geographically a bit out of our element in those last 4 plays. B, this happens in all 4 plays, some innocent character or characters are abused and assumed to have been murdered. The most terrible injustices are committed in all 4 plays. It's part of the backstory. C, this one is really interesting to me. In all 4 plays, the gods haunt the action. No gods come on stage, and the Lord Chamberlain's office of what's the word I'm groping for? When you, not edit, but when you, thought control, speech control, says editing, did you say? Yes, censorship, that's exactly the word. Well, the fog is now penetrated inside my head. The Lord Chamberlain's office censored any language referring to the Trinitarian God. You could not act out the Bible on stage. Perhaps in the Middle Ages, when Roman Catholicism was the language of the land, or the faith of the land, people would put on religious plays in the streets. They were known as mystery plays. Protestants wanted to have nothing to do with this harlotry. As we all know, actors are all gypsies and queers. And besides, to have God talked about on a stage, they maintained, was a bit like meeting a clergyman in a whorehouse. They just didn't go together. Shakespeare gets around this. We have no idea what Shakespeare believed. He didn't leave us his personal credo. What he left is the plays. And the depth of exploration of deep injury and hurt met by even deeper forgiveness runs like a subterranean river throughout the plays. I would maintain that because so few people in our culture really know the Bible very well, sadly including a lot of church-going people, people don't see what's right under their noses. Still less do literary critics who themselves don't know the Bible, many of them. And if that doesn't form part of their thinking, we can dismiss that. But nevertheless, the references to Christian thinking and belief are unmistakable. The gods are there. Notice it's gods plural. That gets Shakespeare around the problem. Yet, if you read Lear, the belief in the gods by the good characters is that they are finally just. They are just. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of the universe bends far, but it bends towards justice. That is certainly a theme of King Lear. We don't need to have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost downstage center for us to understand this in the plays. Shakespeare, like everyone else in his society, was obliged by law to attend a state church. And the state church was, guess what? Anglicanism. So the language of the Bible, not the King James, because that wouldn't be published until 6 years before he died, but the Geneva Bible, which was read by most English-speaking Protestants, that is in the plays over and over and over. The hints are there, sometimes the allusions. I'll give you a small example. In Lear, the good daughter, Cordelia, has come back to save her father from her two insane sisters who are power mad and now fighting with each other for what's left of the kingdom. Lear, meantime, has gone mad and is running around the woods naked as a jaybird and talking to trees. And his daughter has come to rescue him with an army, her French army. And she says to her father, who is not on stage, he is off in the woods, but she apotheosizes him, to use the literary term, when you speak to someone not there. Father, dear father, she says, it is thy business I must be about. Does that ring a bell for anybody? What bell does it ring? Anyone want the mic? What do you hear when you hear, Father, dear Father, it is thy business I must be about? Tell me what it reminds you of.
Jesus.
Yeah, where? The boy Jesus in the temple, that wonderful story that I call Honey, We Lost the Kid. Joseph and Mary have been looking for 3 days for this little brat who's somehow gotten lost. He was supposed to be with the Schwartzes on the way back to Nazareth. No. Is he with Birnbaums? No. We have to go back to the city and spend 3 days looking for him. And when they find him, he says in the Geneva, or the King James translation, how is it that ye sought me? Wist ye not, did you not know, that I must be about my Father's business? Shakespeare wants us in spades to connect Cordelia with Jesus. She's already been connected with Jesus in her refusal of wealth and power, and her insistence on speaking the truth and nothing but the truth, for which she's thrown out into the wilderness by her insane old father. And like Jesus, she will suffer, and she does. So this is just one example of Shakespeare's willingness to tweak biblical text for those with ears to hear. And finally, the last theme element that is shared by all four of those last plays is that somebody assumed to be dead is produced alive in the final act. And of course we know that in The Winter's Tale, Hermione didn't really die of shock after her husband accused her of adultery, but she's been concealed for 16 years in the back room of her friend Paulina's house. So when her repentant husband sees her looking like a statue, which comes alive, he assumes that she has been raised from the dead. So the psychological effect is of a resurrection. You cannot get this outside of a world that thinks in Christian terms. So, those are the last four plays. Much Ado About Nothing is from the earlier period. It's a lighthearted comedy, but it's interesting that Shakespeare's already experimenting with ideas that he will explore much more deeply in the tragedies and the last plays. And if we look at the very bottom of the page, the ideas that page 1, the ideas that I see certainly present in Much Ado are the themes of service and duty. Remember, it was a very hierarchical world. Everybody served somebody else, unless you were at the top of the heap, the queen. And then Queen Elizabeth was wise enough to say, but I am here to serve my people. And of course, everyone served God. So there's this chain of service and command, duty, love, loyalty, obedience, going up and down the social chain. 2, blindness of heart and versus self-awareness. This can be comic, in the case of Much Ado, where people have no idea who they are and what they're doing. But it can also be, as we know, deeply tragic when people refuse to acknowledge who they are, or refuse to acknowledge truth, especially about themselves. Betrayal and forgiveness, self-explanatory, we've already referred to these. And finally, even in this comedy, death and resurrection. So, pause for time check. Time does fly by when you're having fun. It's 9:18. Let's turn to the text. I've just selected, I've merely selected a small collection. Oh, here we have a plot summary on the top of page 2. Why don't I let you skim through this for those of you who don't know it? Just read it to yourselves. All the way down to first theme, then you can stop. the video transcript, they'll think I've thrown you all into a trance. So we have three stories in this play. The large encompassing story, hello Olga. The large encompassing story is that of a toy war, a tiny little pretend, it's not a pretend rebellion, but it's treated as if it were a toy war. Don Pedro of Aragon, who is an upright and virtuous young ruler, has a bastard brother, the bastard Prince John, who doesn't like being treated as second fiddle because he's not of true royal descent. So he starts a revolution against his brother and loses. That's the backstory. As the play opens, we're hearing that it was a lovely little war. Nobody important was killed, says one character. In other words, just a few spear carriers, but they don't count. And none of note, he says. Nobody important was killed. So now we can celebrate. And Don Pedro and his entire entourage have arrived at the home of Leonato, who's the governor of Sicily, in Messina, and they're going to party for a month celebrating the end of the war. Don John has been forgiven and invited along for the festivities, and is treated with the respect due to his royal antecedents, even if he's not legitimate. But he doesn't like it. He's simply one of these people who is determined, when sent to his room without dessert, locks the door from the inside and won't come out. I remember doing that myself. And it wasn't much fun. Imagine it translated into adult behavior when it becomes a settled and fixed attitude, a refusal to come out and play. This is the stuff of damnation. God is constantly inviting us to come out and play. And if we refuse, the choice is ours. I may seem to be laying this on a bit heavily for a comedy, but remember, Don John is Shakespeare's first try at a seriously bad character. It's a rather flat portrait, but it is a first sketch of the most hellish character Shakespeare ever invented, the villain Iago in Othello, who will come some years later. Don John is the first try at Iago. So in the middle of it all, we have two older characters, let's say in their late 20s, early 30s, Beatrice and Benedict. She is what my students used to love to call a feminazi, whereas Benedict has most fun when he is scorning, insulting, and abusing the character, wit, and intelligence of women. So put these two together and you get Major Fireworks, which everybody loves to watch. They are clearly not meant for each other, and yet, of course, you know from the beginning in a way they are. Next to them is a much younger and cuter and consequently more boring couple, Claudio, who is youthful and virtuous and brave, and Hero, who is youthful, she's a woman, and she is Leonato's daughter. And they make goo-goo eyes at each other, and that's really about all that happens, except that their promised wedding is the upset that changes the comedy, the direction of the comedy, all owing to the wicked Don John. Don John has got to find some way to create unhappiness. So when he hears that Claudio and Hero are to marry, Claudio is a young officer in the winning army, he is determined to somehow screw it up. And he does by inventing a scene, much ado about noting, where the bridegroom is invited to a garden at night to see a woman he thinks is his intended, and in the movie it's carried way too far. There is a sexual intercourse seems to be taking place up in the window. That would obviously not happen on the stage of the Globe, but it's bad enough in Elizabethan terms that the bride is conversing out her window at 2 in the morning with somebody who is not the man she's supposed to marry at 10 the following morning. Claudio witnesses this and jumps to conclusions. She's a slut. He will dishonor himself if he marries her. So that is Don John's plot, and it succeeds eminently in that Claudio rips into Hero. He doesn't seek a private interview with her. He doesn't, like Joseph in the Bible, who is a just man and is, I don't need that, thank you.
You guys
You can hear me in the back?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks.
All right. The only thing is I don't think we can get you on the video, but that's all right.
Oh. Where was I? Oh, he never, unlike Joseph, who decides to put Joseph and Mary away quietly, Claudio waits for the wedding itself to accuse his bride of whoredom and rejects her, and she apparently drops dead. At least all the characters who leave the scene are accusing groom, Don Pedro, and half the guests. But they're left with the priest who says, well, this is a fine howdy-do. Here's my solution. We're going to put her away quietly and tell people she died. Then we'll see how Claudio feels. So right away we have the setup for a supposed death and a last act resurrection. The plot is, the wicked plot of Don John is uncovered by the least likely characters. A set of keystone cops, the night watch headed by Dogberry and his associates, and they are complete clowns and doofuses. Whenever they quote the Bible or anything else, they get it completely upside down and backwards. They can hardly tell which ends of their weapons to hold, but they have good hearts. And they overhear a couple of the villains discussing the success of the plot to make Claudio reject his bride. So the truth now is resident in the least likely, the least noble, the least uplifting, socially uplifting characters in the play. A bunch of knockabouts. But they are the ones who will save the day. Which, I remind you, is an intensely biblical theme. David the kid knocks out Goliath. Israel, the smallest nation of least account, is the Lord's beloved. And when God finally decides to show up and save the world, does it in the person of an unemployed carpenter. This is God's method. And interestingly, it's appearing in this comedy as in others. It's a profoundly Christian, it's so obviously Christian that most of us never notice it. Fairy tales in which the plucky little goose girl, who's the youngest daughter in her family, or the carpenter's youngest son, are the ones who slay giants and recover treasures and find their way to the heart of the secret garden. That is not something you find in classical literature. You can only find it in a Christian culture where the idea that the least are God's preferred agents for change. That is Judeo-Christian. It is not Greco-Roman. You won't find it anywhere in the Iliad or the Odyssey, but you do find it in Christian thinking. So, let's plunge in. First theme, courtesy, service, and duty. I find it striking that Don Pedro, who is the highest ranking person in the play, he's the victorious prince, acts with deeper courtesy and sensitivity and tact towards everybody else than many of the middle level characters. He arrives with his huge entourage, and Leonato now has to put up this mob for a month. God knows what it's going to cost him. And Don Pedro says to his host, "Good Signor Leonato, you are come to meet your trouble." In other words, I am trouble. If you're inviting me, you are going to wreck your credit rating locally, but you are inviting me to stand here for a month. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. The fashion of the world is to avoid cost, and you encounter it. He's complimenting his host as well as thanking him. And Leonato, equally courteous, responds. Remember, he is speaking up to the prince, who is his social superior. "Never came trouble to my house in the likeness of your grace. For trouble being gone, comfort should remain. But when you depart from me," i.e., when you and your entourage leave and we're cleaning up the guest bathrooms, "when you depart from me, sorrow abides and happiness takes its leave." It sounds to us merely like courteous banter, but this is how Don Pedro behaves throughout the entire play. Meantime, like Don John, the wicked brother, is standing in the shadows, refusing to talk to anybody or come out and play, and Leonato knows his social duty. We're now on B. And he turns to the brother who everybody knows is a bad apple and says, "Let me bid you welcome, my lord. Being reconciled to the prince, your brother, I owe you all duty." That participial phrase, being reconciled, refers to John, not to the speaker, Leonato. "Since you have reconciled with your brother, of course I owe you all duty." He is his social superior, even if he's a bastard in both senses of the word. To which Don John responds, I think in one of his only very few lines in the play, "I thank you. I am not of many words, but I thank you." When the marriage between Claudio and Hero has been arranged, and we're now into Act 2, there's a lovely moment when Beatrice, looking at the young couple who are now off making kissy face off stage right and goo-gooing, and she says, "Good Lord for alliance. Everybody else gets to get married. Thus goes everyone to the world but I, and I am sunburnt. I may sit in a corner and cry, hey-ho, for a husband." It sounds like mock self-pity. Well, the prince is so far out of her sphere socially as to be unattainable. But Don Pedro, the Prince of Aragon, says to her, "Lady Beatrice, I will get you one." We already know how courteous he is, in that it is he who set up, who brokered the marriage for Claudio and Hero. He didn't have to do that. He's the highest ranking person in the play. But Don Pedro seems to delight in making others happy, whereas his brother, of course, delights in the exact opposite. So Don Pedro says to her, "Lady Beatrice, I will get you a husband." And her answer is supremely tactful. She doesn't want to marry him, but she can't simply say, "Forget about it, Prince." Instead, she says, "I would rather have one of your father's getting. Hath your grace ne'er a brother like you? Your father got excellent husbands," meaning your father begot or produced as children excellent husbands, if a maid could come by them. There should be a lovely pause here, and Denzel Washington in the film does it supremely well. Remember, this is the highest ranking person in the play, and he says to this mouthy, delightful, but not particularly noble young woman, "Will you have me, lady?" It's a question. He is in the position of saying, "I will make you a princess, marry me." He doesn't. He puts it as, "Will you have me?" He puts all the power into her hands. "No, my lord." And then she softens the blow. "Unless I might have another for working days." The joke here is about your Sunday clothes and your ordinary work clothes. "Your grace is too costly to wear every day. I'm not going to marry you because I am not worthy of you." But she treats it as a very sweet joke. "But I beseech your grace, pardon me, I was born to speak all mirth and no matter." Which is pretty true of her character. She will turn everything into a joke. "Your silence most offends me, and to be merry best becomes you." So he takes her on her own ground. If she wants to be the funny woman and not marry him, he'll accept that. That's who she is. "For out of question you were born in a merry hour." And I find this next line so lovely that it sometimes brought me near tears in the classroom. She seems to brush off, or just to close the conversation about her being the funny woman, with an extraordinary remark. He says, "You were born in a merry hour. You were born under a laughing star." Astrology was very important to Elizabethans. And she says, essentially, well, maybe, but she reminds us of what women have been going through for millennia, the pain of childbirth, the pain of bringing a child into an uncertain world. It's as if for just a moment, the comic lens of the play opens up and shows us vistas of sorrow in human life, which is as much a part of it as the laughter and the joy. "No, sure, my lord, my mother cried." And then she snaps back to Beatrice and says, "But then there was a star danced, and under that was I born." It's one of the most gorgeous throwaway lines I know in Shakespeare. It has nothing to do with the plot. If you miss it, you haven't really missed anything essential, but it illumines the scene. Second theme, self-awareness, growth versus refusal to know self or to grow and change. That certainly is taught to us by all the best psychologists and family therapists, and we know it's true. It's just hard to learn to know yourself, to accept yourself for what you are and who you are. As Oliver Cromwell said, warts and all. We get a scene, it's the only scene of development for the character of the wicked Don John, when his henchmen essentially are saying, come on, cheer up, snap out of it. You lost the war, so what? Your brother's forgiven you. Get on with it. What the good year, my lord? Why are you thus out of measure sad? You should hear reason. I've cut a great deal of Conrad's speech, but that's the gist of it. You should hear reason, which is true. And when I've heard it, what blessing brings it? Well, we can laugh. But what parent, or for that matter, what child, talking to an unreasonable parent? Or lovers, or employers and employees. When someone says, if I listen to reason, what good will it do me? Where do you go from there? You can't. The door is locked from the inside. Conrad still tries, if not a present remedy, at least a patient sufferance. And Don John's answer is worth hearing in all of its nastiness. This is somebody who is determined to be utterly closed in on himself, to live without reference to others. I wonder, he says to his henchman, that thou, being as thou sayest, thou art born under Saturn, goest about to apply a moral medicine to a mortifying mischief. Don't give me morality. I cannot hide what I am. Now that sounds wonderful. It's certainly one of the bywords of our culture. Be who you are. Tell people what you think. Well, yes. Are there limits to that as advice for how to get on in the world? If I told everybody what I thought, I wouldn't have a friend left. I cannot hide what I am. I must be sad when I have cause, and smile at no man's jests, eat when I have stomach, and wait for no man's leisure, sleep when I am drowsy, and tend on no man's business, laugh when I am merry, and claw no man in his humor. Claw, I take it here, means sort of cozy up to, agree with. I had rather be a canker in a hedge. A canker is a flower that has got some sort of cancer or a worm in it. It won't ever bloom. I had rather be a canker in a hedge than a rose in his grace, meaning his brother's. I will choose misery rather than the joys of mercy, just because that's who I am. And it better befits my blood to be disdained of all than to fashion a carriage to rob love from any. And I am a plain-dealing villain. Therefore I have decreed not to sing in my cage. If I had my mouth, I would bite. If I had my liberty, I would do my liking. In the meantime, let me be that I am, which is a pretty sad way to be, and seek not to alter me. This will be even more true of Iago some plays later with terrifying consequences. Now we get the same idea of people not knowing who they are. The two loveliest and funniest scenes in the play are the so-called entrapment scenes. It's going to be a week till Claudio and Hero get married. What are we going to do to entertain ourselves? When they are both off stage, Hero comes up, concocts the following entertainment. She says, this is going to be better than reality TV. Let's convince my cousin Beatrice, who says she loathes all men, and Benedict in particular, let's get her to fall in love with him. And let's get him, who says that women are complete airheads and useless, to fall in love with her, which they do. They arrange a pair of interviews, not interviews, well they are in a way. The men arrange to have Benedict, while he's taking a stroll in the garden, overhear them on the other side of a hedge saying, you know, it's just amazing that Lady Beatrice loves him so much. How can she? He's such a boor. Yes, but you know, she writes love letters all night, tears them up in the morning, and says, God, God give me patience, sweet Benedict. Benedict is thunderstruck. How can this be? And of course, he falls completely for it. First, he lays out his agenda for what a woman should be and says that he's never going to fall in love. One woman is fair, yet I'm well. Another is wise, yet I'm well. Another virtuous, yet I am well. But till all graces be in one woman shall not come in my grace. Rich she shall be, that's certain. Whoever this woman is, he would fall in love with. Wise, or I'll none. Virtuous, or I'll never cheapen her. Cheapen here means go out shopping for, bargain for. Fair, or I'll never look on her. Mild, or come not near me. Noble, or not I for an angel. Of good discourse, an excellent musician. By the way, he's describing Beatrice in every word here. And her hair shall be of what color it please God. And then he overhears his friends. And we see below the transformation. He sees himself now as others see him. And what is comic, he doesn't like what he sees. Love me? I must be requited. I hear how I am censured. They say I will bear myself proudly if I know that she loves me, if I perceive the love come from her. They say too that she will rather die than give any sign of affection. I did never think to marry. I must not seem proud. Now, that always gets a laugh, and it should. But I must not seem proud. What does the Magnificat say? Not that this is a deliberate reference to it, it isn't. But it's plain Christian thinking. Pride is dangerous. It blinds us to who we are. Happy are they that hear their detractions and can put them to mending. Again, it's comic, but it's plain old common sense that we heard in the nursery. When you overhear, or when you are told what you have every reason to believe is probably true about you and your character defects, do something with it. And he does. Beatrice goes through the same. Shakespeare cloaks all this, of course, in a marvelous deal of comic sugar, which makes it sound, it's fun, it's not morality. But underneath, it is profoundly moral, not moralistic. Okay, Beatrice, I think we will, in the interest of time, we're going to skip her speech. She's entrapped in exactly the same way. But everything her friends say is true. That she's proud, that she is arrogant, that she has more fun savaging men with her wit than with learning what they might really be like. So she and Benedict are indeed completely deceived. Now we shift to the wedding day, which begins in Act 4. And Claudio's language is so intemperate. I repeat, my students used to ask, if he doesn't want to marry her, why doesn't he just go quietly to her room or to her father the morning of the wedding and say, I think this is all off, I saw something last night. No, he waits until all of her friends and family are assembled and then slashes her. There Leonato says to his future father-in-law, take her back again. Give not this rotten orange to your friend. Remember, oranges don't grow in England, and if they ever reached England by ship all the way from Spain, some of them were probably mighty whiffy by the time they got there. They don't keep well unless they're refrigerated. She's but the sign and semblance of her honor. Behold, like a maid, how like a maid she blushes there. Well, of course she's blushing. Not for her sin, but in horror and shame that she, a delicate young woman, a virgin, is being so accused in public. The scene gets really, really ugly, and I urge you to read the rest of the language. Claudio goes completely off the deep end, and it's not the first time he's done this in the play. He's characterized as a very, very erratic young man. He is handsome, he's young, he's brave, but he hasn't learned a thing about how to proceed forward in a calm and orderly sort of way. Friar Francis, rather like the friar in Romeo and Juliet, says, wait, I've got a plot. We're going to pretend she's dead. His speech is on the top of page 8. First, he comes up with the psychological reason that if we pretend she's dead, everybody's going to remember how badly she was treated, and then they'll be sorry, which is often the case. For it so falls out that what we have we prize not to the worth whilst we enjoy it, but being lacked and lost, why then we rack the value. Then we find the virtue that possession would not show us. So will it fare with Claudio. But at the end, he ends his speech, and I put it in bold, in a starkly inappropriate seeming sentence for a young girl whose wedding day has been destroyed. Come, lady, die to live. Now, if that's not the language of the New Testament, I don't know what it is. Die in order to live. What is it that Jesus says? Those who seek to save their lives will lose them. Those who lose their lives for my sake and the gospel's will find them. It's there. And the priest just does this as a throwaway line, but underneath it lies all this Christian awareness that, remember, the audience, all of whom were required to go to church too, by law, they would have recognized this. They didn't need to have it explained. Then we get the plot unravels. Borachio, one of the bad guys who arranged all this as stooges for Don John, is arrested and brought in chains before the outraged father-in-law who has seen his child just mortified in front of the world. And I find his line interesting. He's surrounded by Leonardo, by the prince, that is Don Pedro, by young Claudio, and Borachio says, "Yup, I did it. I did it. It's Dogberry and the Keystone Cops who have uncovered the plot." And he says, "What your wisdoms," referring to the nobility in the play, "could not discover, these shallow fools have brought to light." And I meant to have my Bible open to the passage, so I'm just going to paraphrase 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 20 to 28. Paul is writing to his knockabout congregation in Corinth, which was known as the Las Vegas, I gather, of the ancient world. And he says, you know, when I converted you, most of you were not members of the upper classes. Most of you don't have PhDs or advanced or even middle-level degrees. You're just ordinary working-class people. But remember, God chose that which is low to undermine that which is high. God has chosen the foolish and the simple in this world, which certainly would describe the disciples, in order to bring truth to those who thought they knew something. For since the world in its wisdom did not know God, God decided through foolishness, the foolishness of God, to bring the wisdom of the cross to the world. That underlies, I would say, Borachio's line. What your wisdoms could not discover, these shallow fools are brought to light. And they are shallow, and they are foolish, but they've saved the day. So Claudio, still believing his beloved to be dead, is sorry. And now, by feminist standards, I would agree, we get the most improbable state of affairs. Leonardo says, well, you can make it up to me. How? Please, show me how I can make it up. I've got this niece, see, and she's just like her cousin Hero. Well, we've never heard about this niece until now. And she needs to marry, so if you marry her, you will make up for some of what you did to Hero. Oh, yes, please, anything, says Claudio. And the morning of the wedding, out come various women with veils on. And Claudio, in spite of some lines that if I were the rector I would cut, that sound rather nasty, says, whoever she is, I will marry her. This is all I can do. We're under C. Which is the lady I must seize upon? Give me your hand. Oh, Claudio then adds, give me your hand before this holy friar. I am your husband, if you like of me. Rather echoing the prince, he puts the power into the hands of this unknown woman. He is prepared to mortgage the rest of his life to a woman of whom he knows nothing, not even what she looks like, to make up for what he did to the one he loved and killed, he believes, through his slander. And she, unveiling, speaks what I still find one of the most mysterious lines in Shakespeare. I've never fully understood it. And when I lived, I was your other wife. And when you loved, you were my husband. That line should not get a laugh. This scene should not be played for laughs. Claudio is stunned, as well he should be. She was dead. She's alive. Is this hero? Is this the cousin? Another hero? Nothing is certainer. One hero died defiled, but I do live. And surely as I live, I am a maid. Let me throw this over to you for, is it 1 minute we have? Oh, heavens, we've got 10 more minutes. Well, let's take 5. What do you think, you want to read this scene, not only spiritually, dramatically, but psychologically. What is the point in Hero's response? Shouldn't she just throw it back in his teeth? A lot of self-respecting women would. When I lived, I was your other wife, and when you loved, you were my other husband. Who has died here? Or what has died?
The false selves.
The false self has died? Yeah? What else? Okay, thank you. I'm asked to remind you that there will be no forum next week being the all-parish meeting and the election, and we'll all be busy picking up ballots, so no forum next week, but still arrive early. Back to the question, what or who else has died? Is there a sense in which Hero has died?
She said.
Well, they thought she was dead, but is there any other sense?
Defiled.
Her which?
The defiled.
The defilement has died, or she died, well, as her father says, while the defilement lived, while her slander was alive, she was being killed, as we say. Has Hero had to consent to any kind of death? What is involved in forgiveness? When we forgive,
Being open,
huh?
being open to change.
To change. So when you open up to change, something else has to
Let
die. What is it?
something else die, right?
You have to let the past die, don't you? It took me the longest time to try to, teenagers, this is all news to them. Well, maybe not entirely. They haven't had the practice that we have in messing up and asking for forgiveness. I think Hero does have to die, and she does it willingly. She dies to her absolutely justifiable resentment. Meaning I always was a virgin. Maid here means virgin. As in maid of voyage.
Pure.
Pure. Well, she's not the slut that he accused her of
Yeah.
being in the morning of the wedding, because he saw her, or he saw what he thought was Hero, canoodling with one of the thugs out of her window. It turns out that it was her maid, Margaret. There are a lot of holes in this play, one of which being, if Margaret did that, why didn't she say something a whole lot earlier?
People don't.
People don't.
People don't. They don't think it's
At the very end, well, what happens after this is that everybody says, oh, wonderful, now they can marry again and truly, and somebody says, wait. There's another woman veiled here. It's Beatrice. And she comes forward, and Benedict is pushed forward toward her. Everybody knows that they've fallen in love with each other. And now they've got to admit it in public. And each tries for one last desperate attempt at his male independence or her feminine intransigence. And she says, don't you love me? And he says, well, no more than reason. Don't you love me? Well, only just as a friend. And they have to be convinced into admitting that they really do love each other. And somebody dashes on stage and says, wicked Don John has been caught at the train station trying to escape, and he's coming back in chains. So this should make us happy, because he is going, this time, he's going to suffer. And Benedict has a really awful line for the end of the comedy. He says to the prince, let me be his torturer.
I'll devise the brave torments for him. Meantime, let us dance. Remember, all of this is an early shot at some of these themes for Shakespeare, and I warmly invite you to take, if you've never been to Stratford, Ontario, it is one of the great cultural treasures of the Midwest. It's a 3-hour drive from here. You can go up, see a matinee, and be back by 9 o'clock at night. And the plays, they're still with us. I will freely admit that there are just as many literary critics who see the plays as a deep, dark look into the futility and the meaninglessness of human life in plays like Lear and Othello, and that there is no hope, and that Shakespeare simply shows us the darkness with little frivolity around the edges. I choose not to read them that way. I see plenty of darkness in the plays, as there should be. That is light. But I see something equally deep. And in those last 4, the themes of injury and forgiveness, of death and resurrection are unmissable if you have eyes to see. Thank you all very much. No meeting next week.